Your Life and Sex Island, Chapter 6, The Life and Sex Island, page 204. Wow, some amazing stuff. Let's compare the first Great Depression of 1920 to the second Great Depression of 2000. Mobilizing for the war ended the Depression. The war did have several salutary effects. The universal draft seemed fair. True, the rich and the super rich did become officers and spent the war on the home front. But then, so did some of the poor. My brother Jim furnished ships and never left the States, though my brother Al, as a navigator, flew missions over the Pacific, was shot down, and was one of but 3 crewmen who survived to be picked up off the wide, wet waves by a seaplane within gunshot of the Japs, 3 miles off Formosa. Some of the mill owners' sons were in the same foxholes as the mill workers' sons. It is hard to be an arrogant son of a bitch when you are fourth on 3 to a match rule. Some of the mill owners' sons became GIs and almost human. Some of them learned to understand and to smile at snafu. Many said to Bob Hope, "Thanks for the memories." And GIs who fought the Japs in the jungle and learned to be shot at, to use a gun, and to organize would never, ever put up with standing in a crowd by the mill gates in the morning, hoping to be 1 out of 500 to be picked for a day's miserable killing work. Never, 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 never. Not that ever for the greatest generation. The Truman-Marshall Plan helped to prevent a return to the Depression. This accidental president turned out to be one of the best. The GI Bill substantially raised the education level in the United States and spread out the crush of men stripping off their uniforms and demanding jobs. These years after the war were some of the best in United States history. There were forces in action driving a trend toward equality. 1952 specifically was the best year ever. A laborer could support his family, a one-income family, and own a house and a car. Union membership rose to about 33% in 1953. Education was free or cheap. My tuition was under $100 in 1954. The top income tax rate was raised to 94% in 1944. Unions were strong. The top income tax rate bounced, but in 1963 it was still at 91%. It fell under L.B. Johnson and ended at 77% in 1969. Now it is about 35%, but there are so damn many deductions for the rich, it is effectively much, much lower. There is probably not a single melting point to the economy, but the first signs of the good times starting to soften, heading in the wrong direction, was probably in the mid-1950s. The Civil Rights Movement, giving blacks more equality, brought blacks into the real economy, bringing downward pressure on wages. The top marginal tax rate plummeted steadily to 35% under Bush II, its lowest value since, surprise, just in the Depression slide in 1931. Women came into the labor market in strength in the mid-60s onward, putting further downward pressure on wages. Membership in labor unions fell to about 27% in 1962. There was a slight uptick to about 29% in 1967, then a continuous slide to about 12% in 2008, about where it was, surprise, at the start of the previous depression. We'll need a numbering system like we did with world wars. Let's call this one the second major depression. Should be the second major USA depression, because there were other depressions such as the one in France before the French Revolution and the one in Russia before the Russian Revolution. This was in today's paper, St. Louis Post-Dispatch 5808 C2, Bloomberg News. Quote, consumer credit rises at the fastest pace in 4 months. The increase in consumer debt totaled $15.3 billion at an annual rate in March. Economists said consumers were being forced to use their credit cards during hard economic times when they are being battered by job losses, soaring gas prices, and higher food costs. The Fed's measure of consumer borrowing, which does not include any debt secured by real estate, such as mortgages or home equity loans, stood at a record $2.558 trillion in March. U.S. worker productivity unexpectedly accelerated in the first quarter and helped curb inflation as companies showed no loss of output with fewer employees. The total number of jobs lost this year, 4 months, that was 2008, 260,000, end quote. Exactly like the first Great Depression. This was in the same damn paper, the same damn day, the same damn page. Associated Press. Quote, worst of the nation's credit crisis may be over, Treasury Secretary Paulson says. Rising gas prices will blunt the effect of 130 million economic stimulus checks. I think we're closer to the end of this than to the beginning, end quote. So deliberately stupid. He's not blindsided if he has no vision. Compare this to the above. Quote, I see nothing in the present situation that is either menacing or warrants pessimism. I have every confidence that there will be a revival of activity in the spring and that during the coming year this country will make steady progress, end quote. That was Andrew W. Mellon, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, December 31, 1929. An echo of Paulson's stupidity, blindsided by a horde of locusts. You can't be Secretary of the Treasury if you have ever been known to have touched anyone making less than $1 million per year. Isn't it amazing how tax cuts to the highest tax rates and inequality caused both the first Great Depression of 1920 and the second Great Depression of 2000? Please, please, do not listen to the professional liars who say the opposite, obviously stupid, that inequality is wonderful and tax cuts for the very rich will cause problems. We'll talk about this some more, but now I have to run. I shall return. Meanwhile, buy the book by clicking on the link in the description below.